Good day, everyone. I am Ram Martinez. I am the GFB chair, and I am here to talk to you about the product pricing tool, report, and guidelines. As mentioned last global education webinar, the pricing tool and report would be updated and would be deployed this mid-November. Uh, right now, the tool is already available as an Excel version and PDF version, but for the sake of the presentation, this is converted as a spreadsheet and G-slide, which would also be available by the time the output would be released. So let's talk about the pricing tool status. As you can see in the image below, this is the global pricing evaluation tool. So by just simply clicking the image, it would immediately lead you to the tool itself. The pricing report, collection, and methodology. So as well, below is the global pricing report and guidelines. And then the product pricing video presentation. By the time that this output would be released, there will be a video that would be released as well. If you are watching this as a video, then this is the output, and if you're reading this as the output, then you can click the video if you need some visual presentation. Before we move on, let me show to you just a quick glimpse of the global pricing evaluation tool and the pricing report. So this is the global pricing evaluation tool in a spreadsheet format. If you prefer to have a spreadsheet, just make sure to make a copy and then save it on your own G drive. Do not save it in the same folder as this evaluation tool is being deployed. And then same goes, this is the pricing report as of October 2018. This is called October 2018 because the last survey was titled GFB October survey with the deadline of November 18. So you can expect every pricing data is as updated as last October 2018 survey, which ended earlier this November 18. Just a quick glimpse. So table of contents, purpose of the report, methodology, then instructions of the usage of the tools, global pricing analysis, then conclusions and publication bibliography. Now moving forward, the purpose of the report is to describe the current state of the pricing of AIESEC exchange programs. Additionally, it shall give each entity the possibility to assess their current pricing as well as in structure and amount per global comparison. For the data collection, aside from the pricing data that is always asked every GFP survey, we also ask these additional questions. First are charging stages of products, IGV sources of income data. So for the charging stages of products, these are asked based on open, applied, accepted, approved, realized, finished, and completed. For the IGV sources of income data, as you already know, there are two main sources that is being done by different entities all across the network, which are charging of partners and charging of EPs. And then subjective opinion. This was actually asked last saga based on what is the product pricing, which are they are far too high, they are too high, they are okay, they are too less, or they are far too less. The subjective opinion is more on what do the entities feel of their current pricing. And then IGT pricing structures. Option 1, Option 2, Option 3, and Option 4. Option 1 is one-time fee. Option 2 is one-time admin fee plus monthly servicing fee. Then Option 3 is monthly servicing fee. Then Option 4 is several installments. So just to quick explanation, Option 1, one-time fee, meaning the partners only paid once. Option 2 is one-time admin fee, meaning there's a bulk amount that is paid on the first installment and then multiple monthly installments afterward during the realizations. Option 3 are monthly servicing fee that usually happens every month of the realization. Then option 4, several installments, meaning there are different methods on how the installments would work, which cannot be categorized only in just one specific option, which is why these several installments are just in one group. So the examples of the several installments are paying every quarter, or paying in two or more installments that are not necessarily servicing fees but rather installment payments. Methodology in comparing the prices. First is purchasing power parity. PPPs are the rates of currency conversion that equalize the purchasing power of the different currencies by eliminating the differences in price levels between countries. We will get in to talk more about this one later on, but just to explain as well, there is a comparison in 5 blocks that is also taken into account. First is average in GDP-PPP per capita group, average in HDI group, average in sub-region UN, average in region UN, and average globally. Now, for purchasing power parity, in their simplest form, PPPs show the ratio of prices in national currencies of the same good or service in the different countries. To enable a global comparison of prices among entities of different countries, it is needed to adjust all values by an economic factor. Basically, it means for AIESEC that in cheap countries, the prices for exchanges are lower than expensive countries. So, by using the PPP and by adjusting the prices that we all have into a common currency, in this case euros, and then adjusting that euro equivalent based on the PPP, we would be able to have a better comparison of our prices in the same level of playing field, because instead of the quote unquote advantages and disadvantages of being in the expensive and cheap country, by doing the PPP, we adjusted it so that everyone is assumed in the same economic factor. Now, in terms of the blocks, as mentioned earlier, first block, average in GDP-PPP per capita group. This block compares the prices with entities which are in similar economic situation as the reference entity. All entities get grouped into 5 groups for economic conditions. So the 5 groups have different ranges from 0 to 10,000 for group 5, 10,000 to 20,000 for group 4, 20,000 to 35,000 for group 3, 35,000 to 46,000 for group 2, and 46,000 to 150,000 for group 1. For everyone that is beyond 150,000 of number is N/A or none, meaning these are the fewer countries that are rich enough that there are just a few number of them, that no need for grouping of them on whatsoever. Then average in HDI group. This block compares the pricing with the entities which are in similar human development situation according to the HDI or Human Development Index. HDI is a summary measure of average achievement in key dimensions of human development, which are a long and healthy life, being knowledgeable, and have a decent standard of living. The HDI is the geometric mean of normalized indices for each of these 3 dimensions. So in simplest term, HDI is the measurement of how good the the how good is the human development within their countries in terms of longevity and healthy lifestyle, in terms of knowledge and skills, and lastly is in terms of the standard of living. Now these are the groups that are being categorized under HDI. So there are 18 groups, all with the 0.5 interval each, and then there are NA groups, meaning there are just few countries that goes under this one. So the higher the number of HDI, that means the higher the human development measurement. Average in subregion UN. This block compares the entity pricing with all entities in the subregion. So as you know, we are not using AIESEC subregions because they are not globally representative. Also, not all countries have AIESEC representation in itself. As you all know, we are only present in 120 countries, but not all countries all across the globe. For calculation issues, the official subregions are used. The values in this block depend on a relatively similar economic performance of neighboring countries of the subregion. As you may know as well, most of the time, majority of the entities that are just within the same subregion are also quite similar in terms of the economic situation, which is why this block is also taken into consideration. Samples of subregions are Southeast Asia, East Asia, Balkans, Western Europe, Middle East, and South America, Central America, etc. And yeah, average fourth block is average in region UN. Same reason as the subregion UN, just have a bigger scope, usually continental, and the reason why this is considered as well is because not all of the AIESEC entities that we have is the same global representation as the one in UN. So as you can see, there are some entities that fall in, like for example, that fall in the AIESEC region for Europe, but not all of those countries are technically under Europe. So, yeah. Then blocks average global. So meaning these are the global averages adjusted by PPP globally. It does not consider any entity grouping and should be analyzed carefully. The reason why this should be analyzed carefully is because since there is no filter, there is no categorization based on the economic situation or geographical location. This is simply considering everyone is equal and everyone can be totaled all in the same field. This is not the best parameter to assess the entity pricing. However, it is good to note on just to identify where are we standing globally in different entities, whether or not it's in the same filter of the entity of the economic or geographic location. Now, pricing report, calculation and assessment. In terms of the calculation of best price, based on all of the described blocks, the 5 blocks that I mentioned earlier, the best price is calculated and presented in euros and by reverse adjusting to local PPP. As all numbers in the comparison section are adjusted by PPP, a recalculation in local PPP is needed to enable price setting. The final price is calculated based on a weighted average of all 5 blocks. The experience has shown that the HDI block is the best to gain a good price comparison and should be weighted high. Secondly, comparison in the economic groups is good to use. The sub-regional block is well usable if the sub-regional countries display a similar economic situation and status. Based on the chosen weighting, best price is calculated and reversed into local purchase power parity. This is the final price according to a global comparison of entity prices. So in layman's terms, the way that we're going to calculate it is first find the euro equivalent of all of the currencies of all of the pricing all across the network. Then reverse adjust it to local purchase power, so power parity, so that we would be able to compare it with the assumption that everyone is just in the same level of economic status. Then once we have that data, we're going to we're going to calculate the weighted average of all of the 5 blocks depending on the weights itself. In this case, we identified HDI block as the highest weight, which actually has a weight of 60%. Then then economics group, uh, which is using GDP-PPP, which is 30%, and then sub-regional, which is 10%. Regional and global bucks are still present, but morely on reference, but not necessarily the ideal, factor for us to be able to in calculate the quote unquote best price, and in terms of comparing what would be the good measurement for everyone. Now, once we had the chosen weighting and the best price is calculated, we reversed the value of this calculated best price into the local purchase power parity, so that this best price already adjusted to the local reality of the entity itself, is we can compare it better because we had it pulled back in the same level of economic reality. This is the final price according to a global comparison of entity prices. Uh, yes. So next is assessing IGT options. Now, based on everything that I just mentioned earlier, it is of the calculating of the weighted average, and also that the fact that IGT has multiple options. According to this structure, it is best to analyze the pricing of an entity only among entities with the same structure. So it could be shown that the amount charged per one IGT differs heavily based on the structure itself. To reflect both an assessment in each option and globally across options, two calculations were performed. So the first and more valuable calculation is the best price only among each pricing option. The second and less valuable calculation is done among all options globally as totaled. Now, pricing tool, instruction, and usage. Don't worry in case that you have problems understanding the things that I just mentioned for the calculation and assessment. We will move on to the simulation later on. But now, let me explain to you the instruction and usage. So, sustainability approximation. The global pricing evaluation tool is calculating the optimal price, as you may already know, based on international comparison, but not necessarily aligned with the sustainability of your entity. So you can say that the evaluation tool is more lenient to external factors, such as economic and market reality, but not necessarily the internal factors that affects the finances of the organization, such as, of course, the budget and the cash flow. That means that you could charge an optimal price based on the calculation of the pricing evaluation tool, but nevertheless are unsustainable. To avoid this, you also need to forecast your revenues and costs and apply several scenarios to see if your chosen price makes you run the product sustainable or not. The GFB has also provided you with a tool for this as part of the pricing tool, so open it and fill it in. Now let's talk about the pricing comparison steps. So first, select your entity. In this case, in terms of the example, Germany was used as an example. Then entity overview. So you can see in this one, this is the overall information that is related to your entity only. First part, general information about entity. So this would include region, contact person, which products are running. Also some external information as well, such as GDP-PPP and HDI group. Second part, entity pricing information. Check if the entity pricing information is actually a lot lower below the tab itself. So later on, by the time that we're going to do the simulation, I will show to you the entity pricing information. But basically, the entity pricing information is a more detailed version of the prices itself of the entity. Check if your pricing information is correct. notify GFB if it is wrong, so that for GFB we would be able to correct it from our side and then have the tool again but updated as soon as the notification has been informed. Right hand side is your subjective opinion about the pricing. The subjective opinion, as well as I mentioned, is asked earlier. Entity Analysis OGX plus IGE. It is the tab for you to do comparison. Use the PPP adjusted price to compare. Remarks is that this is just the recommended price. It is not necessary to follow them 100%. Adjust your price together with other studies you do within your entity. Same goes for pricing analysis IGT. Correction, the title should be pricing analysis, not entity analysis. But once you have the outputs and the pricing evaluation tool, the label would be correct, which is pricing analysis. Anyway, going back, the pricing analysis IGT, there are 4 different pricing schedule options, which are the options that I just mentioned earlier to you before. There are 2 different recommended prices. Again, one for your own option, and one for all options. Use the your option price in terms of comparing, while the all options price is just reference. And then pricing analysis IGV, reference mainly as IGV has too many pricing strategies. Focus on charging on partners, and then compare your prices with other options. Now let's go to the simulation and understanding better. Now for the for the presentation today, we're going to use Germany. So as you can see in this spreadsheet, it would immediately show to you the first tab, which is select your entity. This is more of an introduction tab. You can see there are 5 steps on how to do this in case that you haven't checked out this video or you haven't checked out the output itself. And then once you click this field, it would immediately lead to you to a link to the global pricing report and guidelines, which is this one. Now moving to the entity overview. So this is for Germany. The first part is there's general information. Then as you scroll down in terms of different fields, there are notes here that explains the description of different items, and then there are the details of those items. Then entity is running the 6 products, then shows you which products you guys are running, and then the global volunteer is divided into 3 main parts, which is IGV, charging to organizations, IGV project fees, which is charging for EPs, and then OGV. For charging of project fees, there are two amounts. First is the minimum amount and maximum amount. These were asked per range. As you all know, project fees usually have ranges. Then IGT, option 1, option 2, and option 3, and option 4, as mentioned earlier before, and then OGT. Then IGE and OGE for global entrepreneur. On the side as well, it has the subjective opinion, current currency, and euro currency. So for this presentation right now, the current currency is the same as euro currency because this entity that was chosen was already in euros. However, this would be if you're going to choose the ones in your own local currency that is not euro, this number would also reflect that current currency. Another thing for the current currency as well is that there are some entities that uses a different currency, but it is not the same currency as their own entity. So meaning there are some entities that uses US dollars, but they're not from but their own local currency is not USD. So what is actually chosen, the current currency would identify what is the currency that is submitted in the data. Based on my example earlier, if for example USD and then the local currency is absolutely different, then the current currency is USD. Now scrolling down is the product pricing in details in euro and current currency. First part is IGV, details of the pricing for organizations. It's also asked in different questions such as do you charge it or not. Same goes with IGV, but it's asking more on the project fees. OGV is simple enough, asking how much is charged, then what stage do you charge them. And then moving on to IGT, it shows the different options details. For the options that has monthly fees, which are option 2 and option 3, we are also asking how many months on average is the stage duration of an internship in an entity. So that once we're going to calculate how much is the average amount per exchange, it is multiplying the monthly servicing fee times the average stay. Then option 4 is several installments. For option 4, if option 4 is chosen, there will be more details in terms of the full pricing detail. So similar to this one in option 1, which has the full pricing detail as well. Because as you know, in terms of the GFB survey, we asked for the paragraph version of the full pricing, and you already know that majority of the entities have multiple packages that simply cannot be put in just one type of pricing detail. So that's why we ask this kind of thing. OGT is simply asking the amount, the stage of the charging as well, and subjective opinion. IGE is similar as well, but we are also asking is the company covering accommodations, food expenses, and if there are also other expenses. Same for OGE is the same goes as everyone else in the OGX line. Moving on to pricing analysis OGX plus IGE. So as I mentioned earlier, this part is the current currency, and then there is the part of the not adjusted version for euro. Now, first thing is to adjust the prices based on PPP. So in this case, it is this column, the ones in purple, and then identify the adjusted global values in PPP based on whichever the group this entity goes in. So in this case, as we all know, four of the 5 blocks are GDP-PPP per capita group, HDI group, sub-region UN, regional UN, and global average. So for the first 4, the groups that is related to Germany is for GDP-PPP is group 1, so meaning we average every PPP value of the pricing that are all under the category of group 1. HDI group 4 is also group 1. Same pattern goes for sub-region Western Europe and region UN on Europe. Now, after that, once you have the average prices in different blocks, we would have the weighted importance of these blocks, which is the one that I'm currently highlighting now. As mentioned before, HDI will have the highest percentage, which is 60%. GDP-PPP will have 30% and then 10% on sub-region. Regional and global average would have 0%, but you can try to play it out by simply comparing. But these two are not necessarily ideal in terms of calculating the global comparison, but it's more of a reference. Once we have that, Moving forward to IG adjusted, calculating the weighted average of the global values as mentioned before. It would immediately show the results in these white fields. The one in the purple field is the reverse adjusted value of these weighted average amounts. So in this case is that we find the euro version and then reverse adjusted it to a much lower number, and then from best price you compare it to the current price in your own PPP. So meaning current price is the pricing that you use for your own products, and then there is a comparison to current, and then there's the comments on the side. So the comments will tell you if you should raise the prices or you could decrease the prices. Either way, these suggestions are more on recommendations on what to do, but not necessarily the things that you need to immediately implement on your own entity. Then the ones below is more of a comparison of the euro adjusted PPP versus the adjusted global values to PPP conversion factor. This is a nice touch as a chart just to be able to have a better visualization in terms of comparison. And there are four charts here because they are divided into the four products, which are IGE and then the three OJEX products. Moving on to IGT, same application as the one I mentioned before. The only difference is that this is asking more on the different options that were asked. And then there's also the average of among all of the options as well. So same application as the one before in terms of adjusted PPP and then average in global, a weighted average in terms of global values. We would be able to find the assessment of best price for IGT in specific options. You can see the same pattern as well in here. Just go for comparison on the purple fields on the best price and current price, and then automatically there's a calculation of the comparison to current, and then there is the comment on the side as well. Same goes for the best price of all pricing options, which has comparison to current, and then the comments as well. As you may notice, there are different results, even though that both of which have the same number. Oops. Excuse me for that. Then the one below is more of a chart comparing the four different options and then all options. Now moving to IGV. Now for Germany's part, based on the data submitted, there is no pricing that was charged to organizations, but rather prices for EPs. So in this case, there wouldn't be a good comparison in terms of the current pricing because there is no current pricing. So right now on this one, there is only a calculated average, weighted average of global values, and then adjusted to reverse PPP. Now let's try to find an entity that charges the organizations. Based on the data, AIESEC in Austria charges 250 euros for the organizations in terms of IGV, and then this one there's the reverse. There is the reverse converted factor based on PPP. Sorry, not reverse. There's the adjusted euro price by PPP, and then would immediately use this as a comparison for and then Once we have the best price and then reverse it to the adjusting in the local PPP, we can compare the two prices of best price and current price. Comparison to current price, this one, and then there's the comment as well. Then there is a touch of the touch of the table just to be able to compare the different prices. Then there is the sustainability approximation tool, which is more of a cost analysis version, but we are specifying on the product profit and loss. So what are you gonna do? First, fill out the blank fields. The blank fields are the white fields. So every one that are under calculated indirect cost entity, product pricing per approval, direct exchange costs, and then the approvals. uh, since they all have white black fields, you need to write them down. For this presentation sake, I wrote down some numbers just for sampling. And then the the core performance, you also need to write it down. Now, so what are you gonna do? First, write down the first write down the write down the indirect costs in order for us to calculate them, the total. And then product pricing per approval, so meaning write down the product pricing of per product. This is divided into three scenarios: optimistic, realistic, and pessimistic. I would suggest that you would try to play it out in different pricing that you are trying to consider, and also comparing it to the current pricing. So what you can do is proposal of the new pricing, current pricing, and then a pessimistic would be if you would decrease your pricing. Direct exchange cost per product, of course, this is per product, not all of the total products. Then approvals, meaning what is your approval targets. And then on the right side, it would immediately calculate all of the measurements. So direct revenue would be calculated based on product pricing times approval. Direct exchange costs would calculate direct exchange cost per product times approval. Indirect costs, as mentioned in the formula that was explained in the past global education webinar session. Indirect cost formula is core performance times total indirect cost times the percentage of direct revenue, percentage of direct costs, and percentage of approvals of the product divided by 3. For more information, you can check out the separate global education webinar session under the GFB report. Or if you have questions for that one, you can simply ask the GFB chair or anyone in CBI team. Alright, moving on. Once we have all of those data from number 1 up to number 7, we would be able to calculate the product profit loss. There is the optimistic part, realistic and pessimistic. The product profit loss is calculated as direct revenue minus direct cost minus indirect cost. And then product profit profit loss per approval is calculated by dividing the product profit loss by dividing it by approvals. And then as you can see, you can watch how would be the results in different numbers based on optimistic, realistic, and pessimistic. And then in terms of risk situation, now the risk situation table is more of an add-on wherein we would be able to identify what if the revenue decreased by a certain percentage. So in this case, what if the revenue decreased by 10%? Then what if the cost increased by 15%? Then what would be the result of the net profit and net loss under the scenarios? Now for this case, the way we calculated it is simply focusing on the product revenue, uh, but minus the total cost. So we're not considering the non-exchange product, as we are more promoting in an ideal state of focusing on operations. But if you wanted to include the non-exchange products as well, then what you can do is just simply increase the revenue the revenue risk. Yes, so this sustainability approximation would show to you how would be your current reality in terms of product profit would change based on different pricing, and also probably adjusting the different costs and approvals as well. And also there's the risk situation, just for a more holistic view of the situation. All right, moving on. Global pricing analysis. Now for this one, I am not going to talk about the global pricing analysis, as you may check it in this report, the pricing report, but I'm going to show to you a quick glimpse of this one. So there is the product across the network and charging status at each stage. There's subjective opinion analysis of the entities. There's charging of economic incoming EPs for IGV, median IGE versus IGT comparison, IGV, average IGV and IGE pricing per region, and median OGX pricing per HDI group. So this is more of a insightful analysis that we do, that you can check. It is a lot better for you to check the global pricing report, as this video and these presentations are more focusing on how to use the tool itself and the technical side of it. So now what's next? Changing pricing. Now there are multiple ways on how to change the pricing. Uh, for for one on one hand, if you are starting a new product, meaning you are only, for example, you are only operating 3 products, but you wanted to add one more, you can use the pricing evaluation tool as a good starting base on what would be the ideal pricing or range that on what to propose for. Next is, if you the way that you can implement the change of the pricing is you can have the proposal to start alongside summer peak. Legislation period, for example, would be within November to January. Period for change management, February to May, and then implementation of new price starting mid-year. So period for change management, this was put there. And the reason for this type of thing is that this is good for renewing partnerships with new price. So if there's during the change management, there can be the time of the negotiations already, that there's going to be the changes that's going to happen in the future months, and then the you can already start talking with different partners. Good thing, renewing partnerships. This is would most likely be the situation if you are more of an IGT or IGE entity, and then your partners are not necessarily uh, immediately immediately able to change in terms of the contracts that they already signed for in terms of the pricing. So you can have this type of change management by having a period for renegotiations as well. Proposals to start alongside with new LC term, legislation period within November to January, and then implementation of new price starting February. So this type of approach would be good for OGX and summer peak approval, mainly because after when February is going to start, that is usually already the time of starting for preparation for summer peak as well, and then you can already uh, start the adjustment in terms of the pricing that will be promoted. Then piloting, meaning legislation period and identifying LCs for piloting would be within November to January, period for change management and piloting, February to May, and then implementation of new price across the entity, depending on the result of the piloting, starts mid-year. So piloting basically means you identify certain LCs that would pilot or start this new version of the price, and then see on how the market of that LC is receiving the receiving the new prices. The good with this one is, of course, good for renewing partnerships with new price, assuming there would be changes with piloting, changes with the pricing that would be approved. But the other good thing is that if the price that you wanted to propose is way too big of the difference, like 50%, 70%, 80%, 100% of changes, and then it's and then you the entity and the market is not necessarily as receptive or immediately can adapt to different changes, then you can try to do piloting as well. These are just ways that can happen in terms of how you're going to do the changing of your pricing. This is not necessarily the suggestions from GFB, but more of a pattern that usually happens in different networks. But you can try out which certain approach that would be best in if you wanted to change your own pricing. If you wanted to go for a different approach, that would be totally fine as well. What's next moving forward? Pricing review should be conducted every year. Do not follow the recommended pricing blindly. Use it as a reference. Conduct additional cost analysis and customer acceptance. So cost analysis is to examine the cost structure, while cost acceptance is to study how much the customers are receptive with the products. For customer acceptance, you can do it with a survey spread through LCs or through market research. Consult stakeholders, review the said studies and pricing tool, then change your price. You can also start already consulting with your BOA or with different alumni in terms of the potential change of price. Remember, it is not mandatory to change your price every year, but it is mandatory to review it every year. So you don't need to change it every year, but you need to review it every year. If it's still relevant, if it's still sustaining you in the best way possible. For more questions regarding pricing evaluation tool and pricing report, please contact the GFP chair at gfpchair@ai.isec.org. You may also contact